Good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, coming at you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. And have I got some revelations for you this morning? And happy Sunday, by the way. And we'll be back momentarily with more.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Now, before I get into the crux of today, and the message is the polls are wrong. The polls are skewed. The polls are manipulative. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. But before I get there, we're going to end the show with a couple of clips from Pierre Poilievre's rally in Windsor, Ontario. Wait till you see Carl Levitt of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 773. This guy is incredible. I was floored by how effective this man was as a speaker. Why do I say that? Because he's just an electrician? No, this guy's not a politician, but he aimed for the jugular with the Liberals and found his objective. Incredible speech. I've got about 5 minutes of it to show you later, but it's inspiring. This is not a paid personage of the Conservative Party. This is a labor leader. This is a union leader who's backing Poilievre because he thinks Poilievre makes more sense than Mark Carney. He thinks Poilievre is more on the side of workers, on average Canadians, than Mark Carney. And it is incredible what he says. And I'm holding this one till the end of the show. So stay and watch this because it's amazing. What does it remind me of, though? As I was watching this morning, I was thinking, historically, what does this remind me of? What's it reminiscent of? 1972, Richard Nixon. Yes, I know all about Watergate. 1972, when he was running for re-election, Watergate was yet to be an issue. And believe me, it didn't have to be an issue, but we'll get to that some other time. But Richard Nixon won the largest landslide in electoral college votes, not percentage-wise. That belongs to Lyndon Johnson in 1964, when he got over 61% of the popular vote. It seems incredible, but yeah, that's exactly what he got. Richard Nixon was well over 50%, well over 55% of the popular vote in 1972, but he won every electoral college vote except the District of Columbia. And of course, George McGovern, senator from South Dakota, was his opponent in that race. And McGovern was so far left on issues, just like Mark Carney is so far left on every issue, although he's pretending he's not. But Richard Nixon attracted what was called the hard hat vote in 1972. Now, yeah, that's exactly what you probably think it is. It's unions, labor leaders, and rank and file blue collar workers, because they say, hey, Richard Nixon's making more sense about crime. And crime was a big issue in 1972. And Richard Nixon said, if you put the Democrats in, crime is going to go way back up like it was prior to my election in 1968. Blue collar people responded to that, just like they are to Pierre Poilievre's message, which is stop the crime, make the streets safe, lock up the criminals, don't give them early and easy bail. This is appealing to people who have to work hard for a living. Mark Carney doesn't know what it is to work hard for a living. He's been an elite for so long, out of touch with average people, hobnobbing with the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell, the Confederate of Jeffrey Epstein, hobnobbing with the likes of King Charles III. His brother is the chief operations officer at Prince William's estate. This is where Mark Carney comes from. Detached, uninterested, completely non-empathetic elites. And Pierre Poilievre is breaking through. This is going to be a positive broadcast today. Who else appealed to the hard hat vote as a conservative? Ronald Reagan in 1984. Reagan won a huge landslide in 84. Once again, with the help of Reagan Democrats, who were Democrats who were fed up with the leftward drift of the Democratic Party, even at that time, and said, we're voting for Reagan because he makes sense and we like his policies. Reagan captured a huge percentage of the labor vote in 1984, just as Richard Nixon had in 72. So that's your history lesson for today. That's one of the reasons I hope you tune into the station, because I know a little more about the news than what I just saw yesterday. So thank you for putting up with that part. But I want to show you, and this I had this in yesterday's show, not the poll. Here's the latest Nanos poll. Or are you saying, oh my God, there they are again? They're 6 points ahead. Are they? Are they 6 points ahead? I had Dan McTeague on yesterday. And of course, we were talking mainly about the closure or the layoffs, not closure, or the imminent, probably potential closure of the electric vehicle plant in Ingersoll. 500 workers laid off. And we were talking mainly about that. But we got to polling. And here's what Dan McTeague, former Liberal MP, who's out campaigning for a Conservative nominee candidate this election, who has been a staunch critic of Justin Trudeau, and he has been a staunch critic of Manchurian candidate Mark Carney ever since Mark Carney entered the scene. Now, Dan McTeague is an old friend of mine. We worked together on some issues when he was a member of Parliament and I was a staffer on the Hill. Yeah, we reached across the aisle because Dan was a man of principle and integrity, and he stood for convictions, not political expediency. And that's why I always had a lot of time for Dan. But listen to what Dan is saying about the polling here. This is fascinating, and it's a game changer. You think the polling might be affected by the amount of money they're getting from,
Yeah, no, and I know it is, because I think there's also, if you look at one of the polls I saw last week from Nick Nanos, and I got a hold of someone who works with him, said, why are you polling 50% of the people over 60 years of age? I know I'm in that category, but and I have the gray hair to prove it, but we don't represent the majority of Canadians. It's the under 60 that do, and they're not voting Liberal. So why that? So there was a slight tweaking in the poll, and guess what? It showed the Conservatives moving up, the Liberals moving down as a result of that. I think the next 2 weeks are really the point which people are going to spend a lot of time looking at the facts, and it's not boding well for Mr. Carney. He can't use the Trump issue anymore. The Liberals can't use the Trump issue anymore. What we can use is what happened in Ingersoll, Ontario, which I predicted a month ago, with the closure of the Bright Drop. All this public money has been, fire and smoke had been blown to pieces. You, as Canadians, we as Canadians have given money to these people so they could invest in stupidity, which has now created a situation where not only do we have massive deficits, we got nothing to show for it. And we no longer have an viable automotive sector in Ontario. Thanks, Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney. Looks like working together has worked very much decidedly against the interests of Canadians, both short term and long term.
It probably showed a bit more of that than I needed to. But you heard what Dan said. The polling, disproportionate. They're oversampling, as we say in the pollster business, people over 60. And why are people over 60 voting Liberal? Because they have bought into the Liberal propaganda that Pierre Poilievre is going to do something like Donald Trump and take away their pensions. Except Donald Trump didn't do that either. Donald Trump has said Social Security is safe under my administration. I'm not going to take away old age pensions. Absolutely ridiculous. And of course, Pierre Poilievre has not even mentioned anything like that. So, but the Liberals are suggesting he's going to do it like Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump didn't do it. So that's what a lot of geriatrics, well, I shouldn't say geriatric, I'm getting closer and closer to that age, so I shouldn't. For senior citizens, if you will, people over 60, are saying, I don't want to lose my government pension. I don't want to be cut off by this crazy Pierre Poilievre. And of course, it's all an invention by the Liberal Party propaganda machine. That's why, though. So if 50% and over, if the pollsters are polling 50% and over of the 60 and over, then no wonder the polls are so bad for the Conservatives. Who's voting Conservative? Young people. Yes, 18 to 25, 25 to 35. Why are they voting Conservative? Because they can't afford a house. They can't afford to settle down and start a family. They can't afford to think about the month after this month because they're paying too much in rent. They can never think about buying a house because they can't afford a mortgage. They can barely afford to live anywhere. That's why they're voting Conservative. Because Pierre Poilievre is actually talking about not building communist-style housing like Mark Carney is, but reducing taxes and regulations so that people can afford to buy an affordable house. Yes, and it's resonating with younger voters. It's not resonating with people who already own a house, with boomers who say, hey, I'm fine. I've had a house for 30 years and I've got a cottage and I might even have a second place to go to in Florida. I'm set and I'm just retiring. I'm ready for retirement, man. Okay. You think it's going to get better under Mark Carney for it? It's going to get worse under Mark Carney, even for people like you. But it's not going to improve for people in Gen X and Gen Y and the folks who just can't afford the incredibly unaffordable life that the Trudeau Carney regimes have started. I want to play this again because a lot of people miss this. The closure, there I go again. The layoffs in Ingersoll, Ontario, the electric vehicle plant. I'm not going to say closure again, although that's where it's going. And we're going to see all of these electric vehicle plants eventually close. This is why Doug Ford called an early election. He was looking at a fiscal disaster. He was looking at massive unemployment, massive failure, $46 billion of subsidies the federal and provincial governments have stuffed into electrical vehicle plants, and it's all going down the drain. Listen again to what Doug Ford admitted yesterday. This is not because of Trump's tariffs. Some people have been parroting that BS. This is not why the layoffs are occurring and why worse is yet to come. Listen to Doug Ford. For once, he's talking the plain truth here.
From the president of General Motors that I spoke to, it's going to be about 500 employees. It has nothing to do with the tariffs, he said. The volume is not there. People are not purchasing like they thought they would. So they have thousands of vehicles sitting there. We're going to make sure we support the workers and make sure that we get government, especially Canada Post, to pick up some of these vehicles because that's what it's geared for. Has nothing to do with the tariffs, he said. The volume is not there. People are not purchasing like they thought they would.
Hey, he said it twice. Did you hear it? Yes, it's because nobody wants to buy electric vehicles. And yet we continue to have tariffs on the Chinese electric vehicles coming in, even though nobody's buying them either. And China is punishing our farmers in response. And do you think Mark Carney is going to do anything about that? Do you think Mark Carney wants to offend China when he's in the pocket of China? No, of course not. No. Beijing and Mark Carney are the best of friends. And what Beijing wants to do, Mark Carney nods. Because Mark Carney wants Beijing to be the world economic engine, and he wants their yuan, their currency, to replace the United States dollar as the global currency. That's where Mark Carney comes from. Now, this is fascinating. I played this clip the other night and really didn't talk much about it. But Mark Carney is also completely foursquare behind the Online Harms Act, which died with the last session of Parliament. As soon as Justin Trudeau prorogued, it actually died, but it's really dead now that the election was called. This is, of course, the thought crimes bill. They'll make it illegal for you to think anything. If your neighbors think you're thinking something and you might put it into print or broadcast it, the cops can come to your door and lock you up. Well, at least house arrest. And yes, and $10,000 fines, $100,000 fines for speech crimes that are construed as being hateful in any way. Yeah, that's the online harms bill. I've talked about it extensively. It was Bill C-63. Mark Carney is all for it. Listen to this. A clip from your show last night where you do the impossible. There you are, back at a Carney rally after asking all those impertinent questions the last time you're.
We have successfully infiltrated another Carney rally.
I have to explain. A lot of you probably missed this because I did this interview with Spencer. I don't use his last name because he's doing some very risky reporting, and he is potentially open to negative reactions. Let's just put it that way, from liberal supporters. So it's Spencer. His broadcast is MCGA, Make Canada Great Again. Watch it. This guy is out there doing real reporting, unlike a lot of people on YouTube who never leave their basement. He's out there doing risky reporting, and I've got 100% respect for this guy, and I really admire what he's doing. But he's at this Carney rally last week, and Carney, and of course he's asking about Carney's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein, and Carney immediately gets into the Online Harms Act. How the Online Harms Act can stop people like this from disrupting his rallies.
Elbows up.
For decades, that system is over. And I'm afraid our... Let's get it right. Look. We announced a series of measures with respect to online harm and other factors. And one of the observations we had, one of the issues we're dealing with, there's many serious issues that we're dealing with respect to crimes of violence, conjugal violence, drugs, fentanyl, others. But one of them is with respect to really just the sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, conspiracy theories, this sort of pollution that's online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States. And that's a mild version of that. That's fine. I can take the conspiracy theory and all that. For serious things is when it affects how people behave in our society.
All right, so how people behave? So in other words, the Online Harms Bill will stop people from behaving badly. Badly meaning asking impertinent questions of me at rallies. We'll make sure those people can never open their mouths again. We'll make sure those people are gagged, not only at rallies, but on YouTube, on Rumble. Well, they can't get Rumble. On YouTube, on any other social media platform that's regulated in any way by the Canadian government. That's what Mark Carney wants. Censorship. And he wants the media and individuals and everybody on YouTube. And I say this to all of my compatriots who are on YouTube every day, sometimes twice a day. That's what Mark Carney is up to here. He wants to resurrect the Online Harms Bill, and he wants to use it against you and I, and against the media writ large, and against every Canadian to strip us of our free speech rights. That's what Mark Carney is up to here. Now, I saved the best for last. I promised you this. I am so impressed with Carl Levitt or Levitt. It's if I'm mispronouncing his name, it's written as Levitt. I've heard it pronounced as Levitt. Whatever. I think the guy is fantastic. He is the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 773. Yes, I had to write that down. And this guy is incredible. Just listen to the words of wisdom that come out of this guy's mouth. And I'll stop it maybe once or twice to comment. But can you imagine what this represents? What if the polls are skewed towards the older voters and they're representing a picture that's completely not true. What if Poilievre really has made incredible gains amongst average Canadians? Maybe that's why the NDP support is going down. The NDP support is going to the Conservatives. What if? Think about this. And listen to Carl here.
I'm talking about the New Yorker Mark Carney, who's had his hands. Yeah. That man had his hands up the back of Justin Trudeau's shirt for a long time, wiggling his fingers and moving his lips. Mark Carney's moved one of Canada's largest companies to his home in New York, just months before he became Prime Minister. Imagine that. Yeah, that's right, he's not the Prime Minister. And what kind of company was it that he moved? It was Canada's largest asset company. We all know the people holding those assets, billions in assets. They got mega rich from Canadian inflation, and Carney, he himself made hundreds of millions of dollars off the deal. Yeah. And Justin Trudeau, we know he's not smart. He's not smart at all. If he was, he wouldn't have those people around him. Mark Carney was pulling all the strings, but why? Because Mark Carney was profiting big time from inflated assets, all off the back of you Canadian workers. And Carney swiftly moved his company to New York as soon as Trump became the president. 1 second, my phone's vibrating. Pierre always says don't answer the phone while I'm up here. Hello? Carl, who's this? Mark? Where are you at? I'm at a rally. Who's this? No, I don't need a bike. What are you talking about? I bet you did get a good deal.
Now that is inspired. Incredible. That's the bike shop in Bermuda where Mark Carney has been stashing his billions of dollars in the Bermuda tax haven.
Some guy named Mark called me and he said he's down in Bermuda right now at a bike shop. I don't know. The final thing he said, I don't know if he said he got a deal or if it was a steal. Mark Carney also failed to pay $5 billion in Canadian taxes by hiding his company's assets in Bermuda above what? The bike shop. Hard to believe, eh? That information comes from Canada's NDP, or at least who's left of them, because the irony is Mark Carney's eaten all those people alive.
Hey, do you think this guy might have voted NDP in the past? Do you think a lot of those electrical workers voted NDP in the past? Clearly, they ain't voting that way this election, and that's significant, what he says here. That is very significant.
Even the mayor of Lima has warned Canadians not to vote for Mark Carney. And why? For ripping him off. The poorest of the poor people in Peru, that's who he ripped off. Listen, there are countless other outrageous examples proving that Mark Carney doesn't give a damn about the Canadian working man. And now as Prime Minister, which he's not, Carney is promising to put carbon tax and tariff on the auto industry. It's another rip-off scheme. That's right. We're getting punched by Trump on one side of the border, and Carney plans to punch us on this side of the border also, pretending it's all about climate change. And now he's made millions off the workers' back. He wants more than money. He wants more power. He wants all of the power to do whatever he wants to do. Mark Carney cannot be trusted with this power. Mark Carney cannot be trusted to protect workers. Mark Carney's in it for himself. And when he loses this election, you can bet Mark Carney is going to leave Canada in a New York minute. But there's hope. There's hope. There's our last hope. His name is Pierre Poilievre. Pierre's the only hope for Canada workers. You see, Mark Carney fooled Justin Trudeau, and we can't let him keep fooling us Canadians. Local 773, which I represent, knows Pierre Poilievre very well. And we can proudly tell you that Pierre has our back. Pierre's been putting Canadian people to work, and Canadian workers first. Local 773 began working with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Member of Parliament, Chris Lewis, some years ago, when it became all too clear that the Liberal Party had zero interest in helping out us workers. Upon winning leadership of the party, Pierre made Local 773 his very first priority. He came to my union hall. Pierre made the Local 773 visiting our training center, and he met all our workers. And he made a pledge to me. He's not going to turn his back on us, and I believe him. Pierre was a keynote speaker at the 105th gala I held for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers some years back. And back when he was there, he was the only politician warning everybody about the runaway spending in Ottawa. And nobody really listened to him. Nobody really got it. And after the devastating effects of inflation on our workers, look what we have right now. Over the last Liberal decade, Trudeau and Carney invested next to nothing for workers. That's why Pierre Poilievre has promised, and if you've seen it come out today, 350,000 tradesmen he's going to train on a federal level.
Sorry, my mic was... That's just the beginning. We have 2 weeks to go as of today until the April 28th election. Can this be turned around? You bet. In fact, I don't believe it even has to be turned around. I do believe the polling has been skewed. And I do believe Poilievre has made deep inroads into NDP territory with organized labor that usually goes Liberal if it doesn't go NDP. So there is massive hope here. I'm going to end this broadcast with Pierre Poilievre's remarks at this Windsor rally because I think they're very invigorating.
That 80% of our oil will have to stay in the ground, which means that's like burying our biggest and most important financial asset. This is a great way to make us even more reliant on the Americans, but that's the choice in this election. Do you want, after a lost Liberal decade, to keep our wealth in the ground, block our resources, and depend on the Americans for a fourth Liberal term, or do you want to unlock the power of Canadian energy, Canadian mines, Canadian steel, and bring it home? You know, we're also going to get rid of the entire carbon tax, the industrial tax, the whole thing. Axe the tax. We're going to axe the tax. This is a tax the Liberals put in place for 7 years. They expect to fool Canadians by hiding it at the gas pumps for 28 days, even though it is still on the books. And they could raise it right back up the day after the next election if, God forbid, they were to win again. Mr. Carney says he wants to hit Canadian steel, aluminum, potash, and other essentials with this tax. I will axe the tax for real, for everyone, for good, for a change. And we will cap population growth so that it is always below the growth in the housing stock, the job market, and in our healthcare system. We will bring our people together again. We're going to unite around our common identity, my friends. We're going to rebuild our statues, raise our flags, put our Canadian heroes back in our passport. We're no longer going to apologize for being Canadian. We're going to stand up for this country, bring our money home, put our people back in charge of their lives. But the only way you will get this change is if you vote for it. Are you going to get out and vote? Are you going to tell all your friends and neighbors that they need to get out and vote? Because you're voting for hope, you're voting for change, you're voting for Canada to have a bright future again. We will be a nation that harvests its resources, trades from Canadian to Canadian, builds homes for its youth, secures its borders, protects its vulnerable, honors its history, rebuilds its military, and raises its flag. We are not a nation of tax collectors and toll masters, of gatekeepers and grandees, of rulers and rule makers. No, we are a nation of artists, and adventurers, of entrepreneurs and explorers, of workers and warriors, of pioneers and patriots. What binds us together is the Canadian promise that anyone who works hard can get a great life. That is the hope of Canada. So my message to you, if you are that single mother going to bed hungry, wondering how you'll feed your kids in the morning, have hope, because change is on the way.
Change is on the way. When I come back momentarily, I have some concluding remarks, and there's reason for hope. Yeah, please visit our store. Have a look at what we've got. I think it's some of the best merchandise out there. And I want to conclude with this. I recently wrote an article in Substack that's saying Pierre Poilievre is listening to that small, quiet, inner voice again. Not necessarily to the communications department of the Conservative Party or his strategic analysts or his campaign manager. He needs to do that. He needs to continue to do that. And he needs, and I'll say this, I have to, I'm sorry. He needs, I'm not sorry. No apologies in the station. He needs to stop kicking out from his rallies people with Make Canada Great Again hats on. Those are the grassroots. Those are the people who support you the most. Those are the people who donate the most, work the hardest, and come out to vote in the greatest numbers. Stop alienating your core supporters. That's my advice. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I think it might be worth listening to. But you've got to stop alienating core supporters. Make Canada great again? Yes. I hope you will. We need to do that. Thanks for watching today, folks. It has been a pleasure. Go to church. I'm on my way in a half an hour. And I know, hey, Mark, if you're listening, we'll see you there. Pastor, if you're listening, I'll see you there. Go to church, go to temple, go to synagogue. Let's worship God. It's Sunday, and we still have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and God bless this country. Godspeed you all. I'm David Krayden.